Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Okay, welcome back to CMKL Special Talk 2022. You are with me, Pacharapon Saitongyot, or you can call me Far. I will be the moderator for our talk today. Let me tell you a little bit about our talk series. It's a talk that brings noted speakers to campus each year to provide the CMKL community with different perspectives and topics of thought. And right now, our talk journey has come to the series of 2022, and we are at the episode 14 in the topic of game building. And our speaker for today, he's got a master's degree in integrated design and management from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. And he's also our adjunct faculty of CMKL University. Please welcome Mr. Kamin Phakdurong.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you guys. I hope you did have a good lunch, or if you are having lunch right now, it's fine. Just, enjoy your lunch, enjoy your meal, and, listen to the weirdo talking about game design. So Fire has asked me to talk about, the game design in general. And I think, for this talk, it's going to be a little bit informal. So, if you have any questions, even people on Facebook who are watching the live streaming right now, if you have any questions, just feel free to shoot one, and I will find a moment to take care of your questions. Anyway, so without further ado, I would love to give a little bit of self-introduction. So I graduated from the master degree in, integrated design and management at MIT in Boston. And for my undergrad, I was in, the bachelor degree, the engineering school. The program is called Information and Communication Engineering. It's a little bit of a long name, but actually it's more like, the international program for, computer engineering. And yeah, it's in Chulalongkorn University. And, for my working experience, I have been in the tech startup scene for, I think it's about almost 10 years now. And I have worked on several products, including hardware startup. This is called DriveBot. I co-founded it with my friends from the undergrad at Chulalongkorn. We have 5 co-founders, and the product itself is the hardware, the gadget that you can plug onto your cars and into your cars, and then it can connect your cars with your mobile phone so that you can do the car checkup, see if there's anything wrong, as well as providing some analytics for your cars. And this is another of my companies that I co-found with my MIT colleague. This is called Look Alive Studio, and basically we work on immersive experiences, virtual reality, metaverse, something like that, as well as games for brands. So we work with brands. Our works got featured at so many places. And another role that I have right now is also the adjunct faculty. I am also teach in many courses, such as building virtual worlds. Basically I teach about the fundamentals of augmented reality, virtual reality technologies, and how to use that to create essentially the virtual worlds. Other classes that I teach are lean entrepreneurship and design thinking, as well as human-centered UX and UI design. So even though we're not gonna get into any of these topics, but just so you know the context that I'm gonna even though we're gonna talk about we're gonna just focus on game design in general, but maybe there's something that I would mention from my experiences, teaching these classes, or my working experience in general. So and I also play music. So if some of you also love playing music or producing music, just feel free to talk with me. Anyway, so we can talk about what is a game, right? I think for sure you guys know nowadays what are games, right? Like maybe some of you have played these games before, right? Like I'm not sure, like for people who are having lunch right now, do you guys play Genshin Impact? Anyone? Could you like call your hand? Anyone? Maybe? I think I saw someone. Oh, you played. Okay, nice. Some of you may play Valorant, right? I think this is quite famous one for like students. The Sims, right? The Sims, this is classic. Among Us, for those of you who have kids, I think this is definitely something that your kids play every day with your friends. Dota 2, PUBG, like a lot of these, like so I think nowadays people get a sense of what are games, right? Like everyone knows what are we talking about, right? Like, and today we're gonna talk about like like if you are interested in game design, right? Like how to transition from people who play games into people who makes games, right? I think that's a little bit of challenge, right? Like I remember back, like when I was in undergrad, like before I get into the undergrad school, the reason why I choose to, like get into computer engineering in general is just because I love to play games. And I think this is also like another popular reason for most people, for many people, at least like for my friends back in the undergrad, like everyone just loved playing games. And then that's why they choose to, like study computer engineering, like, so, like for people in the chat, like if this is, if this is also a reason for you to get into engineering school, just feel free to, like type, say yes or whatever. I would love to know that as well, if that is like a common thing for people who get into the engineering school. Anyway, so yeah, when we think about like people who are in the game development team, right? Like these are some of the photos I took from the internet. Maybe you have watched like some of the videos in live as an indie game developer. Like look at them. What do they have in common, right? Like they just some people will say that they just keep staring at the monitor. But anyway, like like in the game development team setting, like if you are the indie game developer, maybe you work alone or maybe you work with a few of your friends. But if you are in a big team, maybe there are like 10, 20 people or like 100 people or like several hundred people, depends. So, like generally speaking, I'm not gonna get into too much detail, right? But just so you know, like for those of you who have no idea at all, like how games are made, like when you think about games, right? At least like on the screen for the players, like the players will get to see some of the characters, some of the graphics, right? So for sure that there should be someone who make art for the games, right? And also like there's the like the audio element or the sound element in the games as well. So that there's a task for creating sound and to put them together. How do you know how to put them together, right? Like how many characters do you need? How many items, equipments that like your playable character can equip, right? You need to design that, make some decisions, right? Make some trade-off, and that's involved with like the game design that we're gonna dive into a little bit today. And then like to put things together, to make it interactive, then you need to code, right? And maybe your games require some narrative, like some storytelling part of that. So you need to write some story, you need to write some dialogue, and maybe you have to send to the sound designer or like the like people who are responsible with the sound to do the voiceover or recording, right? So yeah, you may need to write something, and then after you finish the product, or maybe like most of the time, like nowadays, people will start marketing your games since the development, right? So there's another part there's a myth that if you make something very good and people are gonna just come to you automatically, which is not true, right? There's so many, like competitors these days, red ocean. So, like this is something that you have to do no matter you are the indie game developers or, like work in a team. There should be someone who take care of this one. So yeah, I'm just oversimplifying things, but these are some of the common roles that you might find in the game studio, right? So if you're looking into the career of game development in general, like there are 2D artists, 3D artists. All of these require like different skill sets. Animators, sound designers, music composer, programmers, and for sure like programmers can be categorized into even like more subcategories. Game designers, and we're gonna like dive into game designers in general. So it depends, like the role or the responsibility for the game designers in each project gonna be totally different, right? Like for the small indie team, like I'm not sure if any of the audience are the game designers. Just feel free to like share your experience on like the roles in your team. But generally speaking, like if you work in like a very small team, maybe it's like a mobile games or something, very small project. Maybe you have only one game designer who take care of every aspect of the game, right? Like what is going to be the main character, like how is the control going to be? I mean, the character control, or like how the level, how the environment going to be, how the UI and UX, like depends. Or maybe you need like the extra people who work on the UI and UX. But, like in a more complex projects, a bigger team, game designers could like be like you may need extra designers to work on the gameplay. Like there's a role called gameplay designers who might be taking care of like the second to second interaction, right? Like something that's spontaneous or real time, like mechanics that the player's gonna interact with. So that's gonna be the main focus for the gameplay designers, while maybe system designers will be looking after like the overarching mechanics or system of the game, such as the progression in the game. So like for the bigger scale of the project, you might need to divide that into 2 designers, and maybe like you need another designers who take care of the level, right? Like the environment of the game. Maybe you have like 24 levels in the game. So this is gonna be like the person who take care of that. If your game is even more complex, right? If you have played Witcher 3, I'm not sure if you guys know Witcher 3. Oh, nice. Okay. I saw a hand. That's nice. Okay. So yeah, you may need the level designs. You might even like have extra people who works specifically on the quest, on the missions of the game. There might be like the dedicated designers who work on the narrative, and you might need like the open world designers. You might need an extra designers to work on the economy of the game. So yeah, it depends on the project. It depends on the scale. There's no specific kind of like job description for each role because it's going to be different. Like for this game, but for this is another example of like Red Dead Redemption, which is like the open world kind of like the cowboy game. Like there's a designer who like specifically focus on the mechanic of riding the horse. So like this should give you the idea of how different it is for each team in terms of the role of the designers. But anyway, I think for starters, right? Like maybe we could just like simplify everything and we just call, you guys as the game designers, and your job in general is to know how to put things together, right? Because making games could be complex. There are many mechanics, there are many assets that you have to put together, and you have to test with the users or the players, see some interaction, tweak things, add some visual, add some narrative, like so many moving parts, right? So your job mainly is to know how to put things together, like how to like combine different elements in order to make something that's enjoyable for the players, right? And because of the scale of the projects, and I mean, like you need to work with many specialists. So, like I think it's difficult to complete, like the entire game alone, right? Like, so you need to collaborate. And I think this is another keyword for the game designers. You need to collaborate with other people all the time. So, like you're not combining things or put things together by yourself, but you need to be able to communicate and work with other people so that everyone could help putting things together into something that's good enough, something that's gonna give like an enjoyable experience for the players, right? And it might make you rich, like hopefully, and maybe make your parents proud, like for paying for like the expensive education for you. So yeah, for those of you who don't know how to start designing a game, today I'm gonna talk a little bit about like the simple framework for like if you want to start designing a game. First thing first, like when you think about like most of the game, you have the starting point, right? And this is where the player is. Maybe you start the game and then you get the character, right? And just, like the goal, you need to add the goal for the user. So the user needs, or the player will know what to do, right? Or else like, what is the point of playing the games, right? So yeah, you have the starting point and then you have the goal of the game. And if you think about like, do you think this is enough for publishing the game? I think, like maybe some games would be fine with having only like the starting point and the goal, right? Like, let's say if I give you an example, right? Like, okay, there's a game called Breathing. So if you breathe, you win, right? That could be a game, but it's not going to be the fun game because yeah, that's it, right? Like you just breathe and you win, right? Is the goal is not exciting, right? So if you think about like one of a classic example is that like if you talk about like Mario game, right? You have the character, the plumber, Mario, right? Like, and you need to go to the flag, which is like the ending point, right? This is a goal. It's not so interesting if you don't have something in between, right? Maybe you add points to make the goal or the objectives more interesting. And then you could start adding like the winning and or losing condition to make it more challenging. Like you could think about the points or time goals, right? Like maybe the player need to finish something within the time limit, or maybe it could be the negative goals, such as like if you do something wrong, you're gonna get deducted the point, and if you run out of the points or the hit points, then you're dead, right? Like that's the end, you lose the game. Or you could have like multiple goals or sub goals. So yeah, now once you start putting once you start adding the goals and try to play around with different idea of making the goals more challenging, then now it start to feel like a game, right? If you think about it. So yeah, but then maybe to add a little bit more of tension, you could add some opposition or obstacle to prevent the player from reaching the goal easily, right? Like if the game is just to walk in a straight line like this. You just have to keep pressing one button for, I don't know, like 5 seconds. And then that's the end. You win the game. There's no opposition. There's no obstacle. It's not going to be an interesting experience for the players, right? So, like you could start to think about, like the opposition or obstacles, such as, like in Mario game, there are so many type of the obstacles along the way. If you think about like, I think this guy is called Goomba, right? Goomba is like gonna like move left and right in pattern and it's so predictable. So this is like one of the easiest enemy of the game. And then you have I know his name, but I just call him the turtle, right? So you have to, like jump on top of him. He's gonna get into the turtle shell, and then you can kick it. But you have to be careful because like, like you have to avoid his turtle, his shell when it's moved towards you, right? So there's so many types of the enemies, and these are some of the obstacles that make Mario game more interesting. And even like if you think about the environments in general, there's like the pit that you can fall down, there are spikes, there's like the floor with an ice, right? Which make you kind of like fall down easily. So these are all the obstacles. So once you start adding this, you have the goal, right? You have the goal, and then you have the obstacles. It's gonna be more interesting. But this is just a very simple example. So let's look at something that's a little bit more complex. This is not too complex, but I think Overcooked game. Anyone play Overcooked before? Okay, nice. Okay, yeah. I saw many hands. Overcooked games. Basically, for those of you who don't know, like, and also like people in the chat, like, like Overcooked is like a local party game, like a multiplayer games. So basically, you can play up to 4 players. You are chefs, and you have to cook something. So on the top left of the screen, you're gonna have the orders coming in, and each order gonna have like the recipe, like the sequence of actions that you need to take in order to complete that dish, right? And you have to complete it in time because there's like a bar, like a slider bar here that show the time limits. Like if in order to serve that dish it takes too long, then like it's just like in real life, like people gonna get upset, right? And they're gonna just leave the restaurant. So you want to avoid that. So you have to look at the orders, you have to complete each dish, and you have to serve it in time. That's the basic idea of the game. But and also like I think the if you look at the win-lose conditions, right? Like we talk about the goal, right? To make the games more interesting, you have to add the objectives or the goals for the players. So if you think about like how to win the game, in this game, there's like the revenue here, like the money that you're gonna get from like serving each dish, right? And that's like a time limit. So the win-lose condition is that like you need to gain enough money within the time limit, right? That is like the main objective of the game. And to gain enough money, to gain money in general, you need to cook dishes corresponding to the timely orders. So you're gonna get the orders coming in, and if you complete and you serve the dish to the customers, you get money. And you need to get enough money within the time limit. Therefore, like you need to serve like as many dishes as possible. That's the general strategy for you. But if you look at the opposition or the obstacle in this game, right? Like if you have played this game, it's such a very chaotic experience, especially if you play with your friends, because you only have like, I think in every level you have like maybe like 2 minutes, and then maybe you need to gain, I don't know, like a lot of money. So the obstacles could be, you could, like because you play with other three friends, right? Like there are four players. You might bump into each other and you might fall off the map. There might be the environment hazard in the level as well. Like there's some level that you could fall into the lava. So that's another obstacle. The main obstacle is that like you might do the wrong action or wrong sequence and therefore like ruin your dish and you have to start it over. There might be the miscommunication among your friends because you need to collaborate, like you need to be efficient, and inefficiency is like the obstacle for that prevent you from winning the game basically. So if you look closely, I think this is a very nicely designed game because like people might not aware that this is like all the obstacle is are designed in a way that gonna waste your time, right? Like that's the main goals of the game designers, is that like they want to waste your time as long as much as possible, right? Because this is about like trade-off of the game. You know, like the trade-off that you need to make. You want to save time, you want to be more efficient so that you can generate more money in a shorter period of time, but you have the obstacles of these that are designed in a way that's gonna waste your time. So this is very nicely designed, and I think this show you how, like in practice, a good game will try to think about like, okay, even though it seems very complex, there's so many goals, so many things that you need to be doing, but it's all involved with like saving more time. And there are a lot of mechanics that gonna waste your time for that. So yeah, that's a good example for when you think about like adding goals and adding opposition or obstacles. So now, like once you start adding some obstacles or opposition into the game, you add the variable of decision making of the players into the game. And I think this is a big part of the fun, because in order to avoid or work around the obstacles, the player need to make decisions. And especially if it's a multiplayer games where, like every single player make different decisions, how each one of the decision gonna affect like one another, it's gonna form like a very interesting and chaotic but fun experience as a whole, right? So once you add the obstacle, you allow for the player to make different decisions in order to overcome the obstacle, right? If you think about like, okay, we come back to the Overcooked game again. The goal is to gain enough money within the time limit, and in order to gain the money, you need to cook dishes corresponding to the orders, right? For the players, in order to avoid all of the obstacle that we have mentioned earlier, right? Like they need to think about the strategy a little bit, right? Like they need to think about like which order should I be taking care of first, right? Like because they're gonna be like multiple orders coming in at the same time. So, like you don't need to do the first order first before like finishing. You don't need to finish one by one. So you can choose to take the order that is the easiest first, or maybe you want to do every orders at the same time, but like one steps at a time. Like you could decide to go like multitasking, or just focus on doing a single task or a single dish like one by one, right? Or maybe like there's something happen in the level, because like the environment is quite dynamic in this game, right? There's so many things like explosion, there's fire coming in, like a lot of things that are going to waste your time and prevent you from achieving this goal. So maybe you have to make some decisions in the moment to abandon the current action and just have to move on, right? So there are a lot of decisions, and I would call this is more like a macro decisions, something that is involved with strategy. And then, like the strategy gonna affect the tactics or the execution right? So these are some of the micro decisions, right? Like, because in the game, you can move around, you can shop things, you can communicate with your friend, just say something, tell him or her to do any task at any moment, right? That's another decision that you need to make, like when to speak out, or you can throw the ingredients to your friends. So there's so many micro decisions, but that, like it's gonna come from the macro decisions where, like you have your strategies. This is time to focus on one thing at a time or something like that. And, as you can see, as you add some obstacles, it's going to create some interesting decisions. It's going to allow some interesting decisions for the players to make. And there's like the macro, as I point out, like the macro level of decisions and micro decisions. And I think having both is a good thing because it adds the depth to the game in general. If you think about like, I could think of like a bad example for this, but like for some games, there are not so many strategy you could do. You can just like hold on to the same strategy or same tactic and just keep doing the same thing, and you're gonna win anyway. And it's not gonna be like a good game design, right? Because there's no depth, there's no variations. It's not allowing the players to get creative with, like making the decisions and overcoming the obstacle in general. But again, I just want to point out that depth is not the same thing as complexity. If you look at some games that is way complex, this is called Civilizations. It's one of my favorite game, by the way. Like it's a little bit complex, right? Like this is like a city building game, and you need to expand your empire, and you need to. There's so many objectives. There are many ways that you can win the game, but this is the example of like the complex game where, like just take a look at the user interface here. You have like, I don't know, like how many resources, and then you have like many stats, like, and this is just one city, by the way. So if you build like several cities, each one of the city will have different stats for this. So yep, so many things is going on. And I'm not saying that complexity is bad, like, but it's definitely not the same thing as depth, and you need to separate that. Like you could decide to make your game more complex, and it could like it could attract some types of the player. I think that's the point. But it's not the same thing. So I think the rules of thumb is to, like try to keep in general, but I mean these are just the guidelines. So, like if you understand why the guidelines are something like this, you can decide to break the rule, right? Like, so you don't have to follow it, but in general, just try to keep the goal or the objective simple. Maybe keep it just one, right? Like in this game, even though that seems like there's so many things you need to be taking care of, right? But the goal is very simple: gain enough money within the time limit. That's like the only goal, right? And so just keep it just one if you can, and then try to eliminate like unnecessary mechanics that, like don't align with the way how the players could reach the main objectives. Like try to make everything align into that direction. As Overcooked just gave us, like the good example of like all the obstacles, all the mechanics kind of like align with, like the goal, which is about like saving time and wasting time, right? And I think, I mean, when we talk about like the macro decisions and micro decisions, this is another guideline as well. You don't need to follow this, but I think the game that's simple but deep, which is a good thing, generally have like a wide range of macro decisions that the players can take, comparing to like a smaller scale of the micro decisions that the player need to be thinking about. So, like just take a game of soccer. Even though I'm not an expert in this, like back in the high school, I think I failed the PE class because of the soccer. I don't know how to play it. So that should tell you a lot about like my understanding of the game of soccer. But anyway, like the game of soccer also involved with like the macro decisions or like the strategy, right? Like, like players in the field, you have like 11 players in each team, how you're going to position every one of them, formations, patterns, I don't know, like offensive and defensive strategies, like a lot of things that you can do in order to win against the opponents, right? But then like for the micro decision, it's just about like, like running through the field to the next position and kick or pass the ball, right? Like that is quite simple. But like when you think about the strategies that like the whole team can perform or can do, like that, like infinite opportunities for the strategies or the macro decisions that you can make, right? So I mean, again, I'm not an expert in this, but it just shows you how like why the game of soccer is like a very classic game where it's like it's test and I mean it has been around for a long time. So this is a good example for that. So once you add the obstacles, you allow for the players to make some decisions to work around for that. I'm not sure if if time is up, but I'm gonna just like keep going very quickly and just tell me if the content is too much. But anyway, like you allow for the players to make some decisions, right? So you can, like the player can, like go left or go right in order to work around the wall here. They can go this way, that way, like it all over the place. So in order to prevent that, right? Like you don't want them to just do anything they want. Like basically you need some rules to like at least like put them in the boundary, so that like it rules is not about like limiting the creativity. It actually like maybe you have heard of this, right? Like the rule could like even like enhance the creativity, because like once you have the rule, you have something to stick on, and the player can try to find a creative way within the rules to just like overcome the obstacles. And rules in general, I would encourage like the rules to be consistent and fun. Like sometimes like when we talk about fun, it doesn't mean that it need to be fair, like there's like a misconception that, and I'm gonna show you the example. But for the consistent, actually I have one of the video. I'm not sure if you guys have watched this one, but sorry, like this is in Thai. So, but it's gonna be like a very short video. Okay, let's see if I can share it right now. Okay. Hold on. Okay. Okay. This one. Can you guys see my screen? I'm not sure if you guys can see my screen. Okay.
กล่องปริศนาใบนี้บรรจุสิ่งต่างๆไว้มากมายเลยเดี๋ยวเรามาดูกันดีกว่านะคะว่ากล่องใบนี้จะมีอะไรบ้างตัวแรกค่ะเป็นเลขอะไรคะ1นะคะถัดมาเป็น2นะคะนักเรียนสามารถเดาได้ไหมคะว่าตัวถัดไปจะเป็นอะไร
3ต้องเลข3แน่นอน
เป็นมังคุดค่ะมังคุดค่ะ
Okay. Yeah. So that is that's a good example. Okay, let's hold on. I think I need to stop sharing this screen again. Okay, but you guys can hear the audio, right? Not sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
That's
we
a-
can hear it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good example of like inconsistent, which kind of like just caught you guys off guard, right? Like it just like 1, 2, and then like why Mangkut, right? Which is weird. And if you think about like what will happen if the rules are consistent? Like this is called the game Valorant, which is like a first-person shooting game. Like each team has like five players, right? And I think there's like the attackers, people like the team who need to plant the bomb, and then another team need to prevent that, right? And if you want to defuse the bomb, and then like each round, the time to defuse the bombs are different randomly without, I don't know, like any rules at all. Or maybe sometimes like the defense team could get the bomb, and they like they need to plant the bomb instead, like it if it's all over the place like that, I think people would get confused, right? So it's better to be consistent about the rules so that people know this is the boundary, so that like they could think of the way to overcome that within that rule. And I think I mentioned about the rules need to be fair. Oh no, sorry, it doesn't need to be fair in order to be fun, right? Like this is called Batman Arkham City. Basically you play as Batman. It's like a third person action game. You need to fight the goons here. And like for the goons, in order to help the players a little bit, like if they're gonna perform like a stronger attack which you cannot block, they're gonna show like the feedback or the indicator around their head like this, so that the players know that okay, they're gonna perform like a very special move and you cannot block, you need to dodge around, right? So if you think about like this is not fair to the AI actually, right? But I think it's just more fun because if the AI is so realistic and they just like like keep attacking the players, and sometimes they just perform the special move without any feedback or without any warning at all, like, and the players have no idea, like have no way to avoid that, and you just like keep dying from that, it's not going to be the fun experience, right? So sometimes like I think just focus on the fun of the game when you're designing the rules, but sometimes it's about like the fairness as well, especially if you plan to make like the competitive like multiplayer games, right? So you need to think about that. But anyway, the rules are something that allow the player to ground on, like so that they know the boundary. And I think the last part is the interaction. This is another way for you to think about, like if you study, if you are already in like the engineering, right? Like I think you're familiar with like the concept of like you have like the logic here, and then you have the output and input, right? So as a game designers, you need to think about like the interaction in general. Like maybe the input could be the ease of input, how to make it easy for the players to perform the input in a reasonable level. If you have played this game, sorry for the graphic, it's a little bit weird, but this is called Hand Simulator. Anyone have played this game? Okay, nice. It's a meme game. So normally, right, like in most of the games, okay, this is like a survival game, sorry. So you start the game on the beach and you need to like collect all the materials in order to build I don't know, like the shelter in order to survive. In general, you need to cook the meal in order to like keep your hunger in check or thirst or whatever. But the difference is the way of controlling. So like in order to control each hand, like normally in most of the games, maybe you just walk around, you just like aim at the the material or the item that you want to pick up, and maybe you just press E, which is very convenient, right? But then in this game, you can control only one hand at a time, and then in order to like switch between each hand, you need to press left shift. So once you press the left shift to select the hand that you want, like you have like different keys to control each finger. Just think about like our hands are actually like a very complex yeah. So in order to just pick up things, you need to control like each individual fingers, right? And to control it, once you select each finger, you need to rotate each one of them, like by holding the right click and moving the mouse and so on and so forth. Like actually there are a lot more controls that you need to be performing in order to just do some simple tasks like picking the rock. So I mean, again, this is a meme game, so I get like why they're doing that way. But just imagine that if you use the same way of controlling the character in Genshin Impact, which is like you need to shoot the arrows, you need to walk around, you need to fight, and in order to swing, just do like perform like a swing of the sword, you need to like control each finger to just pick up the sword and then just move. It's not gonna be, maybe it's a good idea, who knows, but yeah, generally speaking, think about like the ease of input, like don't make it too like too crazy. And then you need to think about the feedback, like, or even like the rewards or the atmosphere, something that's gonna appear on the screen when the players do a certain thing, just so they know what is going on, if they're doing right or wrong, or if they are moving toward the goal or not. Like that's something that you need to be thinking of as the game designers. And I think I would suggest to think of it this way. You have, as a game designers, you have the intended experiences, right? Something that you want the players to feel. Like let's say Overcooked is about like chaos, right? Like chaotic experience, but it's fun. Things are not gonna go as the way the players want, right? Like these are something that you want the player to feel. And as a game designers, you can tweak things. You can, like twist the knob. You can change. You can move the sliders. You can tweak things in different areas until like you maximize this slider bar. Like to maximize, to make everything as intended in terms of the playing experience, the gameplay experience. So I think this is a good way to think about it, that these elements that, like this is just the guideline. And if you think about like many games, right, like maybe you have like many sessions, you might have to think about like the progression or replayability in order to connect, like each session together, so that like let's say the players start here, they complete the goal, like they make some decision, they make some strategies in order to overcome the obstacles within the rules and finish the goal or like win the game. Then maybe the player get the new items, and that allowed them to move to the next area and do something even cooler, like comparing to when they started playing the games, right? So you might need to add like some replayability or progression into the game so that you can tie many game sessions together. And maybe, like each individual goal will move the player towards like the bigger goal, something like that. So yeah, this is just like a very simple guideline, and guidelines can be used to steer your creativity to the right direction. That's it. Like that's the main point of the guidelines. It's not meant to just like follow it blindly. You don't need to fit this with like every game idea that you have. You might think about like genres, because each genres will might have like some different formula, and maybe you might have some idea to like to tweak it a little bit to make it more unique, but at least like genres kind of like guidelines, so that you can look at the examples, you can kind of guess like how that group of players think or like love about that genres, right? So that's all like a very useful information to have. And this is like a basic framework. I'm gonna just go through this quickly because like the main part we already got it covered. So yeah, some of you might ask like, what if you don't know how to code? How can you start, right? Like especially as a game designer, some of you might don't want to code at all. But speak of like the classic, not the classic, but like the typical way to make games, right? Like you think about like the game engine in the market, which are free. Unity, Unreal Engine, Go.Game Engine, like these are something that you can just like search if you haven't heard of it, and just download and give it a go, like see if it works for you. There are a bunch of tutorials on YouTube. But if you just want to focus on the game design, right? Like some people ask me about like, okay, like how can I start, like getting into the game design career, right? And maybe you're not comfortable with like coding yet. Like there are a bunch of ways to practice. At least I think this is more about the game design skill, right? Like if you have played card games like Gwen or like Hearthstone, right? I think they have like a very active community where like people would just analyze things, like if there are like new cards coming in, new mechanics, they would love to analyze that in the forum and suggest for improvement. And I think that's like just a good way in general to think about like, okay, in the game there are so many moving parts, and if there's something changed, like how is that going to affect like other parts, right? I think that's like the basic skill that you should keep developing. You might decided to go for like a board of card games, like a very physical form of games, and just prototype that using like like pen and papers, and see how it goes. You might look for the game makers, like there are, I think, RPG makers, which is quite famous. I think to do some simple games, you don't need to code at all. Or even like, I think nowadays, like the popular choice of metaverse, right? Like Sandbox or Roblox, they also provided some tools for you to create the worlds and create the like the characters using like voxel, something like that. You could start from that as well. Or if you love to mod things, that's also another good way for you to practice about like, okay, like how can I make it even more interesting? Can I make another game on top of the existing game, right? Like, and game jam is another opportunity where like you don't need to work alone, so you can just like join a team and try to see whether like you can develop some idea, some convincing idea, and if you can develop like the soft skill in order to convince your team, right, that this is a good idea, this is worth trying, right? So these are some of the like the practice range that you can do in order to like develop like a deep level of understanding how things are related and how each like mechanics or elements affect each other, which aka almost equivalent to the game design skill. And it's also another good idea to boost your portfolio as well. So if you want to go even further, right, like just keep making stuff, boost your portfolio, right, like by doing what I just mentioned. Maybe there are other ways as well, but like talk with your friends, like develop your soft skill, right? Because this is quite important especially for the game designers. But I think it's important in general, no matter what career you decided to pursue on, right? Like you need to develop the soft skill. Just share, collaborate, learn, talk with people in the industry to get a glimpse of like what is it about, like what makes you progress in this career path, right? Like what is the difficult part? What is, like, and I think different people gonna have like different experience, especially for the game designers, because it's very relevant. It's very specific to the projects. Like each project, like game designers in different projects gonna have totally different experience at all. So I think it's always a good idea to talk with many people in the industry, just to understand more, and so that, like, let's say if there are many job opportunities for you, you can select the one that might suit you the best, right? And also, like, once you start working, you will gain more working experience. Maybe you will be specialized in a more in a certain type of the projects, and that might land you into the next big projects in that area. That might happen. But I think to start this career, sometimes you don't need to start as a game designers, right? Because like in each project, they're gonna be looking for, like, like many projects gonna be looking for like a more experienced game designer, right? So maybe you could start in other roles as well. I think there are so many like famous game designers that start in other roles rather than the game designers itself. Like some people start as the QA testers, some people start as the writers, some people start as the artists. So depends. And I think it depends. Like maybe you want to work on your own projects, then you need to find a team, or like try to find a, like what I mentioned, like land your first entry level job first and see, like try to learn as much as possible and see if it works for you. So I think that's it. Like it's a very never ending journey. So I think, like good luck if this is something that you want to pursue. And I think that's it for today.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kamin, for your talk about game design. Okay, we are right now at the Q&A session, so we should start our first question from Dr. Sally. Okay, she said that I'm interested in gamification to engage people in educational or other useful tasks. How does the goal of, for example, teaching someone something valuable as opposed to just having fun modify the game design process?
For using this framework specifically, I think gamification also has its own like famous frameworks, but I think it still go along the same theme as this framework, which is about, like you could try to make the goal, which is like the action that you want to encourage the users to do, right? Like if you want to gamify something, like let's say you want them to learn more, I think the most effective way is to make the goal interesting. So, like the content itself that they need to do, that to learn, right? Like that certain action should be valuable to them first. But I mean, you could try to add something to make it even more interesting, or try to, like at least like give them the trigger, right? You could add some obstacles. I think gamification also involve a lot with like the progression. I don't know where's that slide, but the progression is like a big thing in the gamification, which is like you want them to keep doing the certain actions, right? And every time they finish that, you're gonna have like the progressions. Maybe they collect something, they get the new items. But gamification also talks about like different kind of plays, especially, like when we talk in the context of, like most projects, sometimes the users are not like the play. They're not gamers. So, like different people will have like different motivations. Some people is all about like that action that you want to gamify, whether it's valuable to them, or maybe it's about like the higher purpose. Like let's say if you complete this, it's gonna I don't know, like it depends. Some people may the social elements might be effective to some type of the players or the competitions. So you need to I think it also go along with like design thinking, right? Like to understand, like you need to understand the users for your platform as well in order to see like what kind of motivations could they use and how is that translate into the gamification mechanics, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, we have other questions from Shirley. She also interested in gamification for educational purposes. Actually, she's asked that how can we build a game without coding, but you also told us that you don't have to code to design a game, right? So what are the free tools for us to construct the game? Like,
I think it depends, like try to be open. Actually, just yesterday, I have been like playing around with like, I think a lot of you have used like Figma, right? And Figjam, which is like the virtual whiteboard, right? And I think they just released like the new widget called Interactive Figma Land, which by any means, this is not meant to be for creating a game, but like it just allows the like the users to just move the characters anywhere they want, right? And I think this is such a good opportunities for creating games, don't you think? So I feel like like anything can be a tool for you, even though if you don't code, right? Like maybe you want to run a workshop and you could try to gamify it using like what they already have. Like they have the photo booths, so you could have like the challenge, like asking all the participants to just take a selfie, like, but try to be the weirdest, like do the weirdest face, and who is the weirdest, we could have a vote or whatever, and then that's gonna win, right? Like, I don't know, it depends, but just try to be creative. Like, I think nowadays there are so many tools and it just depends on how you use it, like, yeah.
okay, for your last question, also from the Dr. Sally, she said, I'm not much of a game player, but it seems from the outside that they are alike. I mean, within Zhong, how feasible is it to break out of the Zhong's box?
I think for genre, generally speaking, I think this depends on people, but for me, I feel like genre is only like a good starting point. But as you start developing the game, it's not so much about the genre. I think genre is just for like, it's just about like giving you like a simplified definition so that you can talk with other game designers. I think that's it. But to break out of the genre, actually it's quite easy. You can just like do something like the opposite way and you can just break out the box, right? So to me, it's not that important whether you need to break out the genre. Like, I think it just like you just use as a tool, as your starting point, as your template, and then you can go for that. And I think it's gonna just like, if you always like, like ask yourself, like, how can you improve this idea? Like, what is gonna be something that you can add or take it out in order to make your intended experience more, I don't know, like more interesting or concise. If you keep pushing that, I think you're gonna break out of the genre anyway. But I don't think that's like one of the most question to have as the designer, I think.
Well, I mean, the reason I asked that is because I've had a bunch of students in projects who were trying to design games. And they didn't really think about what should go into the game. They already said, oh, I need characters, I need assets, I need, it's like they
Yeah.
all they did was generalize based on the games they've played. There was very little creativity or very little thought about like, how can I make this game be really creative? It's more like, okay, I already know what
Yeah.
third-party shooter game is like or whatever, and I just know what I need, and bang, 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 and then it's like boring.
Yeah.
So that's where my question
I see.
how can you
I-
get
yeah.
away from what everybody already knows has to be in a game?
I see. If I have to think of it quickly, I would encourage them to, or maybe I would just do it with them by like playing more games with them and try to analyze like what is the fun part of that game, right? Like, because even like the first person shooting game, if you don't think of it that much, it's just about like shooting, bang, 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 and that's it, right? But maybe, okay, let look at the example, right? Like Valorant is require like a more like a mechanical skill. You need to be precise in order to win, right? But Overwatch, with like at the forefront, it looks the same. It's about like shooting people, but Overwatch is more about like kind of like the strategy and tactic and communication, and there are some mechanics that contribute to that. So I think I would just like encourage them to just analyze into the deeper level and just see try to feel like which mechanics that contribute to that feeling that makes this game feel apart from this game, something like that. So I think that will allow like the students to I don't know, like come up with like different variations, and hopefully like once you choose the one that fit with your goal, maybe the game will just like variant from something that's very cliche, right?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kamin, for your talk, like game design or game building. I think from today, our student will have more clue on how to put decoration, the words of games. And maybe in the next few years, we might have a chance to play a game from one of our students today. Okay. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you,ครับ.
Okay, get ready for spring 2023 admission. MS and PhD in Electrical and Computer Engineering ECE and Artificial Intelligence and Computer Engineering ARCE will be open for admission from the 1st August to the 1st September 2022. And for more information, please visit our website or scan this QR code. Okay. And are you ready for CMKL Open House 2022? A good chance to get to know us more, whether our program, curriculum, and many more. Please stay tuned for registration and see us on October the 1st, 2022. And an excellent camp is back. Is it an exclusive 3 days camp, which is designed to help students immerse in the field of technology? Please stay tuned for registration and meet us in the mid of October at here, CMKL University. And for our next episode, you will meet Mr. Thanawit Prasong Pongchai, who will give us a talk in the topic of behind the scene data visualization for 2022 Bangkok governor election. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this talk and see you next time. Bye-bye.